Working hard is worth it if you're seeing results. And when it comes to working out, the same thing is true. You want the maximum benefit in the time you have, and that's exactly what Tonal is built for. And with their latest iteration, Tonal 2, you can ensure your workout is more tailored and effective than ever. Tonal's at-home strength training system uses adaptive weight to learn from your movement and set the optimal weight for every move, adjusting in 1-pound increments up to 250 pounds, challenging even the most advanced users to push their limits. You can also experience a full-body burn with the new Aero HIIT workouts, the perfect blend of heart-pumping cardio and strength. Plus, the new built-in Smart View leverages a high-resolution camera that lets you see yourself during your workout, analyzes your movement, and provides real-time coaching, just like a personal trainer. Right now, Tonal is offering our listeners $200 off your Tonal purchase with promo code 200TONAL. That's Tonal.com and use promo code 200TONAL for $200 off your purchase. That's Tonal.com. Promo code 200TONAL for $200 off.
You know, on this program, over the years, over the decades now, we have occasionally liked to discuss extremely existential subjects, really deep, weighty stuff. Now, most of the time, we're a decent amount of time in the toy department, and none of it seems all that weighty, although at the time we're talking about it, probably feels as if it is. But every once in a while, we try to go deep and existential. And I'm going to try that today. It's dangerous because my voice is not in real good shape. We all came back from the North American Irish Dance Championships in St. Louis, Missouri, with some form of crud. And being the tough guy I am, I'm still here. I don't know if I will be the rest of the week. I'll milk it if necessary. But there's no This Is leader at the top for that reason. I don't know if I could hit the note. So I won't try. But that doesn't mean we are in any way, shape, or form mailing in today's program. In fact, I think we have not one, not two, but three distinguished, accomplished, and outstanding guests. So I'll give you details on that in a minute. Guardsy is, I think, chasing Golden Gopher women's basketball again. So he is out today, tomorrow, and Thursday. What's today, Tuesday?
It is.
So he's out the next three, right? And you're back. He's back on Friday, I believe. Brett Blakemore's in that chair, at least for today. Are you the next two as well? All 3 days?
Yeah, so I'm here, I think
Tuesday,
Wednesday, Friday, I think it is.
Oh, it's Friday. I apologize.
I think so.
You think he's back Thursday and then gone again Friday?
Yeah, funny.
What the hell is the schedule, the Gopher women's schedule at this point? I'm confused. In any case, this opening subject might be a little unfair to you because of your age, but I still got to do what I got to do, right? We still have to do a show. We can't let that get in the way of subjects that we want to explore. And when the day began, I did not intend to go down this particular road. But I finally started a music documentary that I'd heard good things about. And my original intent was, okay, I'll watch just to get a feel for it the first 30 minutes. I think it goes almost 2 hours, maybe 150. And I could not turn it off. I could not stop watching the thing till its conclusion. And that's the inspiration for this existential conversation. The name, and again, it's going to depend on your age. The name of the documentary is Sly Lives, a.k.a. The Burden of Black Genius. And it's the story of Sly and the Family Stone, specifically Sylvester Stallone. And how do I explain this? It's an uplifting story at times. It's a remarkably depressing story at times. It's essentially the rise and fall of Sylvester Stewart. I think I said Stallone. Stewart. His story. And the story's been done before. It's reasonably well known for people old enough to have grown up with his music. And I will tell you that I believe, pound for pound, when it comes to synthesizing everything, funk, rock, psychedelia, soul, nobody touches him in his prime. To me, he was the Sandy Koufax of popular music. Late 60s into the early 70s. The fall was precipitous. And I think this documentary, put together by Questlove, does a better job than any of the others in digging deep and telling all of that story pretty unsparing across the way. The only person you don't hear interviewed currently is the man himself. He's still alive, but by all accounts, he's just not going to be able to put sentences together in a way that's going to bring any life or history to the story. So what the producers find, what Questlove finds, is old stuff from him and more current stuff from members of that very eclectic band. And the fascinating, again, beyond loving his music, we're going to try to get Jimmy Jam on sometime in the next week or two. He's heavily featured, along with his partner Terry, throughout the doc. And I don't want to go too deep into it now, but when we have Jimmy on, he'll explain the sort of seminal moment as he's sitting down with Janet Jackson at an Italian restaurant in Minneapolis. I'm going to find out which one. And a light bulb goes off when a Sly Stone song comes on. And that ended up being the key to Rhythm Nation. He influenced everybody. I know people say that all the time, but he really did. And that certainly includes Prince, if you need to go local angle as well. But the part of the story that I want to get into existentially is this. As tragic as his fall was, as much as you say, God, so much talent, it just didn't last as long as it should have for him. The years that were great were unprecedented, but didn't last long enough. And that's because he started going even heavier down a drug road. Some other things enter into the picture as well. Even band members become disillusioned and to say, we're moving on. The existential part is simply this, and it's an age-old question that's been discussed many times before. And that is, do individuals who have this kind of creative genius when it comes to, in this case, music, any cultural sort of genius we're talking about, you're not curing cancer, but you're having a huge impact in your own way, because many of us are very much inspired by music, moved by music, need music in our lives, and have had music in our lives perhaps as long as we can even remember. But the question is whether the quirkiness, perhaps the vulnerability, the need to perform, to be lauded, does that end up being the blessing and the curse? Is it all tied together? In other words, if Sly Stone wasn't as vulnerable as he proved to be regarding just sort of keeping his life together, would he have been as effective as an artist, as a musician? How much of that is all tied together? Now, we obviously have artists who stayed consistent for longer. You say, well, there's your answer to your question. You don't have to necessarily wallow in that lifestyle in a way that says, well, it's inevitable. You're going to do something really stupid. You're going to get involved in drugs. You're going to die. Or you're going to, bits and pieces of you, little by little, are going to disappear in a way that you're no longer the same person. You no longer can reach those same musical heights, and your personal life is a disaster and is a mess. Is it all tied together? Is that what makes these folks geniuses? That they have that sort of... So when we talk about when they perform brilliantly and they write brilliantly, and when they fail and turn tragic, is it all tied together? It almost feels like we are more surprised if people in that business or several businesses stay on the straight and narrow. I mean, you can talk about authors, you can talk about musicians, you can talk about actors, and as much as we lament the sadness of ultimately, where Sly Stone's life went, is it the price that a lot of artists have to pay because it all draws from that same place? as I said, some of that want, some of that vulnerability, some of that need, does it end up being, we shouldn't be surprised. They can't be separated. That quirkiness that makes them a genius musically also makes them more vulnerable to going down bad roads, paying attention to the wrong people, and maybe even to a certain extent believing the clips, believing all the adulation, and getting so lost in it that you can't even recognize that person anymore. If you see in this documentary late clips of Sly trying to sort of hang on, it is a little like Willie Mays at the plate for the New York Mets, and you go, oof, man. Oh, please. Now, in the end, as I've always said with people who remember that part of Willie Mays, what do we remember first about Willie Mays? Greatest baseball player I ever saw at Wrigley Field. One of the greatest maybe the greatest baseball player ever, but certainly one of them. That's what is at the top of the list. And with Sly, it continues, for me, to be the brilliance of his music. And the stretch he went through where he was doing, like I said, doing stuff that had never been done before and that ended up inspiring a lot of other artists. That's the question on the... And to that extent, does that mean, as sad as it is, should we not lament it as much as we do? Because it's just, that's the price. That there's a chip missing, a vulnerability there that helps them reach certain heights, but it also is the same thing that might take them to significantly low depths over the course of their career. I would love an opinion or two via the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line on this very existential, controversial subject, 64686. Now, you could say in a way, I'm almost trying to let individuals like Sly off the hook for making some of the decisions that they made. They say, well, it's inevitable. It was out of his control the way it went. It's the way it goes. When you reach the heights he did, you're going to end up crashing on the rocks. Maybe that's too easy. Maybe that's letting these individuals off the hook too much. There's a famous lyric from Neil Young. Better to burn out than to fade away. And at some point later, John Lennon said, well, that's a bunch of crap. Basically, what you're saying is better to die. What's good about dying? And he came to a different place to say, no. I can still, believe in my artistic, in pursuing my artistic muse without this notion that I have to romanticize screwing up my life, continuing to use drugs indiscriminately and irresponsibly. At some point, the best thing to do is to grow up. Those are the questions on the table. Heavy for a Tuesday, I admit, but watching the documentary, which if you are a Sly Stone fan, I cannot recommend it enough, because there have been a bunch of them, and I came into it skeptical because I didn't think any of the other ones really nailed it. And I thought this one, on a number of levels, just did so brilliantly. And a couple of people had said, I think one of the producers working with Questlove had said, well, we didn't want to make this as negative as some others have been. I thought it was pretty unsparing, honest in places, but also did a good job of attempting to celebrate and maybe even explore, because race is a big part of the story as well, that aspect of it. Whether if you are at least at those days, a black genius, musically speaking, is more expected of you, and it's more likely that you're going to end up, down on the rocks, shredded to pieces as well. So that's the opening salvo. We got Seifert at 3:30. So I'm going to take a couple maybe texts on this when we come back, but I will definitely explore it more throughout the show because we'll have time to do that. Kyle Potter, Thrifty Traveler guy, is going to join us at 4:02, and Louie to help us preview the big rematch, right? USA-Canada is it Thursday night?
Thursday night.
Thursday night for all the marbles in your favorite tournament, correct?
That's right.
On
our soil.
And you loved the fighting, didn't you? You loved that.
It was rare,
but
I did.
It was organic. You did like it, didn't you?
It's rare that I enjoyed it.
You and Chip Scoggins are both frauds, because you're saying the same thing, because he said, usually I hate it, but there I loved it. It sounds like you feel the same way.
I kind of do.
Unbelievable.
Heads Up Minnesota, Slightly Stupid is coming to town with their unique blend of reggae, rock, and blues. Don't miss out on this epic night when they take the stage at the Ledge Amphitheater August 6th. Tickets on sale now. KFAN.com, keyword calendar for more details.
Comedians are another category of artists that seem to frequently suffer from deep-seated need for validation and acceptance. Often not the cool kids in school. That's from 715 Guy. JD in Northfield writes, Dan, I just finished Kaplan's 3 Shades of Blue, a new book. In fact, I have the book. I have not cracked it yet, about Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Bill Evans of the famous, iconic Kind of Blue album. All were from very different backgrounds / parts of the country. All geniuses and all heroin addicts. All died young. The drive of finding or seeking jazz perfection was equally part, hold on a second, let me scroll down, finish that one up, of their individual fabrics. That tortured genius addict thing certainly applied in their cases. Great topic / show. It's a great example of exactly what we are talking about here, that there seems to be. And look, a couple of people have said, oh, wait a minute, there's some folks who look at Paul McCartney, look at Springsteen. Yeah, there's exceptions to the rule, and good for them, you could say. But I do think there is a connection there. Whatever drives them to let this talent they have out. And by the way, one of the subplots of the story is that when he was in his prime, Sly never left the studio. He was one of those perfectionists who never left, was never satisfied with a take, was constantly cajoling and motivating and pushing the musicians around him. That was, and usually in any profession, that might come at a price elsewhere, make you a little less functional, if that's everything you're going to concentrate on. But given the adulation one receives, how many people out there would raise their hand and say, God, I'd love a taste of that. I'd love to be in front of hundreds of thousands of fans and have that sort of, get the natural high that often Sly Stone and other musicians got, right? That it doesn't just have to be a musician, right? I mean, it's for a lot of people we're talking about, they would love to be a famous athlete, right? They would love to, oh God, how cool would that be to basically own an arena or a stadium. We all, I mean, who doesn't think, well, God, how cool would that be? You got people in your back pocket. They're basically, you have them in the palm of your hands, right? Woodstock. Sly Stone they have some great footage of him at Woodstock. Want to Take You Higher. And it's almost like religious what he's doing up there. Already, by the way, battling drugs that night. And the reaction from the audience as well. Neil Young was talking about the mentality that fellow musicians musicians have about abusing drugs. I don't believe he was advocating. There have been several studies that link higher correlation of mood disorders, in particular bipolar, with creativity. Maddie in St. Paul. Yeah, well, there's great disagreement on what Neil Young intended, and Neil Young himself, I think, wanted to soften the original message because he was getting so much heat about it. But, I mean, here's the thing. I don't think it's a crazy argument to suggest that to attain the most out of whatever your muse is, whatever your art is, singing, songwriting, instrument, whatever, that to pursue it to the highest levels you can get, well, it may well be that if you have a better chance to get there than if you're well adjusted. That's the trade-off. And then you have to decide as you get older, well, is that worth it? I mean, I got kids, or I got another life, I got other things I want to worry about. But I don't think that's crazy to think about. There are some artists who've pushed back and said, well, and let's face it, it's only by sheer luck that many artists are alive that abuse drugs through many, many years. And they'll say, I don't even know how I'm still here. You know, I got lucky. Because I know a lot of my friends and colleagues and fellow musicians, but the grace of God go I. It could have easily been me as well. Let me try to get to a couple more texts now, and then we'll save them. Great topic today, Dan. Not to take the religious approach, but what I believe is it's the price when you sell your soul to the devil. I believe selling your soul is losing who you are for morals or fame, and that seems to be where a lot of these artists are. I'm a huge rap fan, and it's rampant in rap music. Well, that's a whole nother subject. I'm not here to address or lecture that part of it. I wouldn't call, is it selling your soul to the devil to reach the heights that Sly Stone did musically and culturally? Because when he was at his highest level of popularity, he was at the top of the food chain, musically speaking. So I think that's maybe a little bit different subject. I recently listened to Sly Stone's autobiography. Leaves me very interested to check out the documentary, especially knowing that it was put together by Questlove, who does great work. Sly was indeed a genius, troubled, but a genius nonetheless. That's from Mike. Yes, both things are absolutely true. I'm a huge Sly fan, truly enjoying your opening. That's Brett from Inver Grove Heights. Are you guys taking any talkbacks for Seifert for a question? You can hit the talkback. Seifert will be next segment, and I'll be glad to include some of those. Questlove is on a roll, right, Steve? 50 years, SNL, 50 years of music, the Sly documentary, Summer of Soul, 1969 Bronx Festival, which we had talked about. In fact, Jimmy, I thought, was trying, because Questlove came to town, I think. Was he at the Walker? He was somewhere local, and Jimmy thought he was going to help get us on, and it turns out we were unable to. That would have been very, very nice. Peter Popsicle is wondering, have you ever seen the video of Sly and the Family Stone at the Ohio State Fair, 1968? It's on YouTube. No. Is it mythic? I'll take your word for it that it indeed was. You can't take a vocal maintenance day like when PA takes 20 of them during the Vikes season? Wow. That's a shot. That is savage, isn't it? That's unfortunate. That seems a little mean-spirited, doesn't it? It's unnecessary. Documentary, by the way, for the record, I believe you can get it via Hulu. I got it via Disney Plus, but I think it's a Hulu production. That's also, and there may be other places you can get it, but I don't even, like I said, I think there's I'm paying triple. I think I have 3 subscriptions to The Athletic. I think I may have 4 subscriptions to Disney Plus. They give you these deals where, okay, if you had this, I think I'm paying a month between $1,000 and $2,000 in prescriptions. Prescriptions. No, that's very different. Subscriptions. I don't even know.
It's dangerous.
It is dangerous. There's no question. Speaking of dangerous, well, today's the day. Technically today, as of today, the Vikings could franchise Sam Darnold. I don't think there's been any sign that they're doing it yet today, but our next guest will be able to answer that question and many others. Kevin Seifert, not in studio, but by phone. He's a wimp. It's kind of cold for him.
Wild Wednesday is sponsored by Jim Beam. The official bourbon of the Minnesota Wild are here all season long. Listen every Wednesday through March for your chance to win tickets.
Kyle Potter, Thrifty Traveler at 4:02. Louie will join at 5:30. Kevin Seifert is with us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline now. The folks are already very unhappy with you. Might as well get this one. Let's lance the boil early, get this out of the way. This is from Carl in Lake Elmo. A colleague of yours, Seifert, boy, just so disdainful the way he puts it, wrote an article today of the best fits for the top 50 free agents. The Vikings and their top 10 cap space were mentioned as a fit for only one top player. And it's just re-signing their own Cam Bynum. No offensive line, no defensive line. What gives, Seifert?
I would, what was the name of that listener?
Carl from Lake Elmo.
Yeah, I would have Carl check the byline on that story. and see if my name is actually on that.
Whoa.
It is not.
Whoa.
So but I appreciate the sentiment because I used to do the NFL's free agent rankings, and so maybe it's just muscle memory for Carl, which I totally understand. But I haven't done that in a couple of years, so that was actually some of my other colleagues, and you can argue whether they're right or wrong, but but one of them I know is Matt Bowen, who is a very thorough analyst, and I would trust what he has to say. But that it was an accurate representation. We only had Cam Bynum being a target for somebody else, but I thought Sam Darnold and the Raiders were on there too, but I could be wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wants to see. He's just figuring the Vikings with all that cap money, there should be a chance to add a second piece. Is he wrong?
Well, maybe it points to the fact that even when you have a lot of cap money, that there's not always great connections between what you need and what's out there.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Yeah, you see the names, and you say, hey, we can check this box here. Here's our defensive lineman. Here's our guard. And the whole bit, and not taking into consideration there are other teams out there, or the player might want to stay with the team that he's on if it's a better team. I think but you guys promulgate all that nonsense because you get people all worked up in a frenzy, free agent frenzy. In fact, that's what you call it, literally speaking. And so that's then why people lose their minds thinking, God, we're going to be able to check so many different boxes.
Yeah, and they had a great year last year doing it too.
They did.
So there's precedent for the Vikings being able to build a playoff caliber team. Predominantly through free agency, which they did last year.
All right, so I don't think we talked last week. Let's go back to the aftermath of the postseason setback. From that day, whatever that date was, forward to today. Has anything switched in your mind regarding your view on how likely it is that the Vikings do sign Sam Darnold at least to the franchise tag? Do you think it's any more or less likely than you did right after the season ended?
Well, I think, I walked out of the building in Arizona after the loss to the Rams thinking that they couldn't bring back Sam Darnold and that nobody was going to want to sign him based on the way at least to be an unquestioned starter, based on the way his season ended. But that, within a few days, my view on that had changed after I took some time away from it, take the emotions out of and the recency bias out of it and recognize that, he still had one of the better seasons in the NFL at that position. And there's going to be multiple teams that are probably interested in him. Adam Schefter has reported that the Raiders are going to be one. So I think it's very similar to what happened last year with Kirk Cousins, that unless there's nobody else out there and it only takes one team to do it, that's willing to give, last year was Kirk Cousins, this year Sam Darnold, a multi-year contract to be an NFL starter, whether that's 3 years, $100 million, 4 years, $140 million, whatever it would be, then unless there's no team out there willing to do that, I think that he will probably not be re-signed. It's not out of the question that if there's multiple teams out there that the Vikings could eventually use their franchise tag on him and trade him. But I think the clearest path for him returning would be either him not wanting to find out what he's worth on the open market, right, or somehow turning down, much better offers, or just not having offers to come to take. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So, in that scenario, he would come back here in a short-term way for basically an undervalued type contract. So that seems to me at this point to be fairly unlikely. And that's, how I've felt since the few days after the Rams game.
I'm trying to do math in my head real quick here, as it pertains to your guy, Aaron Rodgers. So
yes,
if we go from the end of the season back towards the middle, 5, 8, 9, 11, 13, 16, 18 touchdowns and 1, 3, 4 interceptions going all the way back to October 27, the rest of the season. What's wrong with that? Why you seem so dismissive, you and so many others, of whether we should have some interest in A-Raj, and those numbers aren't bad. 18-4. Now they didn't win a lot of games, obviously, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, was he as bad as it felt like he was? Because I think the perception is he was awful.
I mean, it was. Yeah, no, I think he was just clearly not the same player that he once was at the height of his career, and that's not exactly an insult to say that somebody who's playing as well as anyone has ever played the quarterback position is now playing it a few levels below that. So I think there's definitely a feeling in the NFL that he's, if matched with the right team and the right situation and the right coaching staff and the right ownership, that there's going to be a spot for him this season somewhere. And Adam Schefter, threw out the idea that if the Rams end up not being able to agree with Matthew Stafford and end up trading him, or I guess cutting him, but I think they could probably trade him, that Aaron Rodgers would become a very interesting name for the Rams. And so that's the kind of environment that you would think for an Aaron Rodgers. And so and then you say, well, what's the difference between the Rams and the Vikings? And there really isn't, except that, we have an
heir apparent. Yeah.
Yeah, they already have the heir apparent. And so, it's hard to think beyond 1 year for Aaron Rodgers as he's approaching his 42nd birthday, I think. But, whether you even want to introduce him into that situation is something that you'd have to spend a lot of time talking about internally.
Let's stay with the quarterbacks. Would you be at all tempted? I assume the financial ramifications are frightening, but would you be at all tempted to talk to the Rams about Stafford? Because I still think he's pretty damn good. And I guess I'm confused why they want to move on. I guess, is it all money again? Because he's got to be, I assume, in the 40s or 50s, whatever. But would that be crazy or just impossible financially? Or why are the Rams doing that, or at least allegedly, reportedly thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it's just, I have interpreted all the stuff that's happening in LA just a matter of posturing. He's basically at the point in his contract where you would have to redo it because there's no more guaranteed money, and he's certainly in a spot where he should not be entering a season with zero guaranteed dollars. And both sides recognize that, and it's just a matter of how far the Rams are willing to go. Stafford's wife has a podcast, and she kind of questioned the future that he might have there if the team is also going to be getting rid of Cooper Kupp and who knows what else. And kind of hinting that she would at least be interested in a new adventure, but obviously Matthew himself has not said that. So I think there's just a lot of contract posturing going on. There's no reason to think that the Rams think they'd be better off with Aaron Rodgers than Matthew Stafford, or Sam Darnold than Matthew Stafford. But until that point comes where they agree on it, on a number, then that speculation will continue.
Do we have any reason to believe that the Niners might be sniffing around or around Darnold? Is it the Raiders? I mean, I assume he's not going back to New York. So then I start thinking
the Raiders have come up as a according to Schefter, as a really strong contender for him. Chip Kelly was hired as the offensive coordinator there, so certainly a pass-heavy type offense, and Pete Carroll's the head coach there, so a strong head coach in terms of just managing that position. And so that's something that's come up. The 49ers, it sounds like the 49ers are all locked in on Brock Purdy.
Okay.
And continue to be, and they couldn't, I think, Kyle Shanahan was pretty strong about that after the season. Now, does that mean they're going to pay him, Joe Burrow money because he's the next quarterback up, because he's now eligible for a contract extension? I don't know about that. But even if they don't, he can't go anywhere. He's only going to be entering the fourth year of his contract, which is the final year. Not ideal, But certainly it's not like he can force his way out either, I don't think. And so he's going to be their starter unless something really goes awry. And it's just a matter of whether they get in agreement on a contract or he plays out the season.
Kevin Seifert covers the National Football League and the Vikings more specifically for ESPN and ESPN.com, and he sometimes gets credited for writing stories that do not bear his byline, but that's part of the deal when you work for the juggernaut like the four-letter network ESPN. Quick Kirk Cousins question, because a lot of people said, well, they got to move on, right? Because it's obvious that they're ready to turn it over to Penix. But did I read somewhere or did I listen to somebody say that like the dead cap money for Atlanta, if they do move on from him this year, is like $80 million? Is that a number that's even possible?
Yeah, I mean, they signed, I don't know if it's exactly 80 million, but they signed him to a massive contract that, Kirk talked about, like wanting to be told via the structure that he was the long-term guy, and they did that. And so it turned out, what was supposed to be at least a 3-year deal becomes a 1-year deal. And those are the kind of mistakes that lead to massive, dead money hits. Like if they were just to cut him, I was looking at my chart here. I think the dead money is 65.
Okay, million. 65. That's still a lot.
So that's massive. Yeah. And so, so it's really hard to take that, to consider that number, but it can be done. You can spread it out over 2 years, depending on whether it's a cut or a trade or whatever. But the big thing is that, like, the idea of him being the backup in Atlanta doesn't really seem to Michael Penix does not seem to be likely. And so it'll just depend on the nature of the separation and how that's accounted for in the salary cap. But it could be that number if they take certain, depending on the path that they take.
We've got a text out of Isanti from Kyle. If we don't bring Aaron Jones back and the Ty Chandler thing definitely hasn't worked out, what are our options at running back, either through free agency or in the draft?
Well, while the draft is getting dragged for a lot of reasons this year, especially because it's not a strong quarterback draft, it's an excellent running back draft, is my understanding, and that's no secret. Like, I think you can hear that from everybody. And so the chance of even with the Vikings' small number of picks as it stands right now, of them being able to get not necessarily a starting 300 carry a year running back, but somebody who can be part of at least a committee right away is higher than it often is. And so, and Kevin O'Connell has kind of, like, during his Radio Row tour of media interviews, was pretty clear that he wants Aaron Jones back, but as part of what the original idea was for him to be part of a committee and not just be the lone guy as he pretty much was last year. And so I think that's a reasonable expectation. If somehow Aaron Jones thinks he can get more playing time or a better contract somewhere else, and he ends up going elsewhere, then they would probably have to do a combination of free agency and the draft. But I do think this is a good year to be looking for a running back if you're going to try to get a young one in the draft.
Is my understanding, I thought this just happened in the last few days, that we did some sort of restructuring with with Jones, that allows us to put off the end game decision on whether we can get Jones inked to a new contract. What was that all about?
It was mostly an accounting thing for the salary cap, which if they had not pushed it back, they would have his contract would have voided already, and it would have pushed the dead money up into this year. And if they were able to get him signed even to a 1-year contract with some voidable years after that, they can eliminate the immediate impact. But it was a small amount of money, and it's not really a huge indication one way or the other. The other thing that happened along those lines, and it's happened since you went on air, so you may not know, but they did the same thing with Byron Murphy, the quarterback.
Okay.
Our ESPN's Dan Graziano reported that today, and that one's actually a bigger piece of news because when you do that and you push it back to the day before free agency started, it makes you ineligible for the franchise tag or the transition tag. And so that wasn't a big deal for Aaron Jones, because no one thought that he would be a candidate for the tag. But I do think that a lot of people believe that the Vikings would at least have considered using one of their tags on Byron Murphy, and now they will not be able to do that. So that's it. As we go through this franchise tag window that opens today and goes through March 4th, that's one less opportunity the Vikings might have to use it.
That is interesting. Does that, in your mind, then translate that for us? Does that make it any more or less likely, you think, they're going to be able to bring him back? Because I would assume they want him back or need him back.
It continues it gives them more time to negotiate it before he would be eligible to negotiate. Because again, his contract would have voided and already. And so, that dead money would have come. And so it extends the amount of time that they would be able to negotiate something before free agency. But now that he has a free pass into the market without having to worry about any tags, unless the Vikings blow him out of the water, he would be well served to at least go through that 3-day negotiating period to find out what his value is. So I'm not sure it makes him any more less likely to sign, but it prevents the acrimony of a potential franchise tag threat.
Do we have any more at this point, any more knowledge as it pertains to like Harrison Smith on what whether his future includes another season or going to include another season with the Purple?
I do not have any new information on that. I know that he said last year when he kind of went into that decision, he said that he kind of went underground and was spending time with his family and doing work around the house, and then looked at ESPN and saw they were doing a free agency preview, and he was like, oh well, I better figure out what I'm going to do. And so then he called the Vikings and said he wanted to play, and so they got contracts hammered out. So I don't people have this vision of him or maybe some other players every day sweating it out and trying to figure out, oh my God, what am I going to do? My whole life, could change. And I don't know that that's the way he approaches it. And so, I don't know if the Vikings have a great idea yet either on what he'll do. I think they want him back, as far as I can tell, in terms of his value to the Brian Flores scheme. And now that we know Brian Flores will be back as well. And so, I think we're still maybe a couple weeks away potentially from knowing about Harrison Smith's future. Past 2 years, it's really kind of come up right before the free agent market opens. And so doesn't mean he doesn't already know in his heart and his head what he's going to do, but if there's any indications out there, I have not heard them.
So refresh my memory. I know this subject came up during Super Bowl week. You didn't go. And
thanks for reminding me.
Either. Yeah, I think you were fine without going this year. But the ongoing subject of how quickly we're going to get that 18th game, where does that stand?
Well, the NFLPA executive director said something like nobody wants to do that, which it's a lot different than saying nobody will do it.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think that just means the negotiations, they're open for business on that, and whether the NFL needs to give them a second bye week or whether it needs to give them some other concessions that will convince the players to do that, we'll see. I think the understanding is that at least the preseason would go down to 2 games, so to keep the number of total games at 20 preseason and regular season. But there's if they don't do anything, the CBA goes until the end of the decade, and so in theory this wouldn't change until then unless both sides agree to go back in. And so I think it could whenever the NFL comes up with something that the players are willing to accept in exchange is when it'll happen. And so I don't know that it's going to be a 1 year, they'll get negotiations done this year and have it start next year, but it wouldn't be a shock if it was within 2 years or 3 years.
So what's the guiding principle? Is it every time you add another game, that's another $1 billion to the league? Do we know what that number is?
I don't know the exact number, but it's obviously substantial.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, like, where's the next thing? Is there more? Would they expand the playoff field? Is there where else can you get more money? But for the moment, that would be, adding another week to the national television and streaming and all of those sort of things. It's, there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake there. I think is the conservative estimate, and so. That when you understand that, and you know that the players themselves get a percentage of revenues and not just a capped number, that they will also benefit financially from that, even as their bodies do not benefit from it. You can see why it becomes something that everybody's very interested in.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but John asks, the mail carrier asks a fair question. We throw around these terms like franchise tag, transition tag. Do you know the difference between the two, or can you articulate what exactly, how the average rube could understand the difference?
Between franchise and transition?
Yes.
So franchise tag, if you use it on somebody, it means that they can still negotiate with other teams, but if they sign an offer sheet with another team, that team would have to pay them that contract and then also 2 first-round picks. In order to get them, unless they use what's called the exclusive franchise tag, and then you can't do that at all, but that number is even higher. And so that's what a franchise tag is. It means you get compensation if that player leaves your building, and you didn't decide to match that contract. Transition tag, if you use that on a player, they can go out and negotiate a contract, and that team would have to pay you that contract, and the only recourse the original incumbent team would have is that they can match it. They would not, if they decline to match, they get no compensation. That's how the Vikings got Steve Hutchinson back in the day.
That's
been
right.
a few other occasions where that has happened as well. So the big difference is franchise tag requires some level of compensation, and the transition tag just gives you right of first refusal.
We appreciate the time. A little disappointed you didn't come in, but I mentioned to Guardsy, it's kind of chilly, and I don't think you enjoy this weather. And
yeah,
it's the off season. So I think that's fair. I'm in such rough flu shape. I shouldn't be in here, but I'm a gamer. So
I'm definitely glad I didn't come in.
Yeah, I would have put you in the other studio with Blakemore.
Oh, okay.
I have great. Okay. Yeah, I would have been really careful about that. I wouldn't have sneezed on you or coughed on you. Yeah, I'll get there. I hope. I either get better. I'm in that place right now where it's either going to get better or worse, And I think it's 50-50, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, we'll root for the plus 50.
Thank you. We'll chat soon.
Okay, Dan. Yep.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Louis will join in about 90 minutes. We'll talk plenty of hockey with him. Let's talk aviation. It's all the rage right now, especially after what took place in Toronto, Ontario. I think that was yesterday, wasn't it? Yeah, it had to be, because today's Tuesday, and that was Monday. Kyle Potter, Thrifty Traveler guy, will join us. If you have questions or observations for him, hit the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line 64686.